getting Elevate to where we are today and with the speakers that are here.
Martha Stewart, everyone. Former First Lady of the United States.
Commander Chris Hadfield.
ACON.
Mr. Bill Morneau.
Join us in uniting the world's innovators to solve society's greatest challenges.
Bad times usually create great companies.
You can either help this issue around income inequality, or you can bulletproof your Tesla.
Before we start today's show, I'd like to take some time to reflect on the recent news events over the past 10 days. This weekend, over 150 cities around the world united to peacefully protest the unjust killings of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd, as well as the countless hundreds, thousands of members of the Black community that have been suffering from systemic racism and violence in our community for over hundreds of years. Elevate was founded on the principle of diversity is our strength, and while I am proud of the work our team has done promoting diversity and inclusiveness on all of our stages, on our platforms, and profiling those leaders that are creating a better tomorrow, over this past week, we have failed. We have not done enough. We have one of the largest platforms in the tech and innovation communities in this country, and we needed to do more. While we have always stood with the Black community and those underrepresented communities throughout the beginning and founding of Elevate, this past week, our indecision came across as silence, and for this, I apologize. We've been having a number of conversations with people from the Black community and the allies that support them around the right actions to take. And we discovered that many people are in support, want to be on the right side of history, and want to affect change. They're just not sure how to act. We saw the efforts of Blackout Tuesday and a social media campaign, which started the conversation, but it didn't go far enough. It isn't going to change the things we need to do in our society to change systemic racism in our community. And so Elevate wants to use our platform to have those conversations and help answer the questions of how we can all do more, how each of us can take steps every day to undo hundreds of years of institutionalized racism in our communities, in our companies, in our communities. And so we are going to deviate from our regularly scheduled program next week and invite leaders of the Black community, the allies, and the people in leading the conversation around how all of us can do more. Because while this is the beginning of a very important movement, it is not the end. We need to continue to build. We need to continue to support. We need to continue to learn and listen. But most importantly, we need to continue to act. And so the discussion next week is going to be on how each of us in our homes, in our teams, in our companies, in our communities can act. How do we affect change? And so I'm looking forward to bringing that conversation to our Elevate community, because I know many of you felt like Elevate did, where you wanted to show your support, but maybe were worried about being perceived as insensitive, or maybe you didn't act in the way you'd like. And so we want you to join us, because we all need to come together and move forward to help solve some of the challenges in our community. Again, Elevate has a large platform in the tech and innovation space, and we need to do more. And so tune in next week to learn what we are going to do, what we're going to encourage other tech founders to do, what we're going to encourage corporate Canada and our government policymakers so that we can help affect change in our own community. I want all of you to join us in that conversation. Invite your friends, invite your families, invite your companies, because I know there's so many wonderful people that do want to be a part of this movement. And we're going to start with a conversation, but our goal is to inspire action, because until we all act, until we all take one step that leads to another step, that leads to a giant global movement that continues to deal with the systemic racism in our community, things won't change. And we want to make sure that we are doing our part. So if our indecision or lack of public support in any way offended anyone, again, I want to apologize. I can tell you we've been really thoughtful, maybe a little too much so, and need to make sure that we're leading the way when it comes to action. Okay, so we are going to start this week's show, episode 10 of Elevate Live. I am so excited to welcome our guest, Aaron Levie, on today's show. Aaron Levie is the co-founder and CEO of Box, one of the leading cloud computing, storage, collaboration companies on the planet. Aaron has an incredible story. He had the vision of Box and started the company out of his dorm room. He took a simple idea and transformed the way all of us collaborate and communicate online. Box started off as a little tiny idea in his dorm room and is now one of the most valuable publicly traded companies in cloud computing and SaaS, with almost 2,000 employees around the world, generating over $700 million in revenue. And what's great about Aaron is that he's one of the youngest CEOs of a publicly traded company. Inc. magazine named him the Entrepreneur of the Year in 2013. But what I love most about Aaron is how wonderful of a dad he is, how he is so close to his family and his child, and just being a really great role model to founders everywhere around prioritizing, obviously, not only your company, but equally important, if not more important, your family. So welcome to the show, Aaron.
And very, very important message that you kicked off with. And obviously, in America, we're having, an incredibly important conversation and moment right now, really to work, hopefully towards, undoing hundreds of years of systemic racism that we've had in our country. And it's not going to be easy, but I think people are saying enough is enough, and we have a lot of work to do to try and create progress on this front. So this is something, especially the technology community needs to step up, and so it's great to hear that message that you kicked off with.
Yeah, no, listen, thank you. We all need to do more. Even the ones that are doing a lot, we all need to do more. And great to see you personally and your wife have committed $500,000 to supporting community groups that are fighting injustice. Talk to me about what inspired you to do that and what you hope to see in terms of making changes.
Yeah, well, obviously the past couple of weeks have been an incredibly, massive reminder of, that we've unfortunately had reminders of every single day for really as long as Twitter's been around, and we've had iPhones to just put it right in front of our face of the continued systemic, racism that we have in our country, and the challenges that the Black community face every single day, and especially the past couple of weeks. There's been a huge reckoning of that conversation, and so my wife and I decided that we needed to do more than we had been doing, and I think based on some of the initial efforts that we were seeing from some great Black leaders within Silicon Valley, where they were starting to rally around donating to important organizations that were focused on improving racial justice and improving the criminal justice system in America. we decided to make sure that we could contribute in a sort of an immediate way that we felt like we could help with. And so that was the $500,000 commitment, which obviously in the grand scheme of things is going to be a small drop in the bucket, but it was exciting because we saw lots of other support come together. We've seen a lot of other corporate support and sponsorship of some amazing organizations in the nonprofit ecosystem that are working toward better racial justice and equality. So again, I think this is, we're day one of a very, very, very long journey, but I think we're starting to see some snowball effect that I'm optimistic about, and unlike I've seen in my professional career thus far around the level of energy, the level of focus. But this is not going to be simple. It's not going to be easy. This is again, we have some real systemic issues in our country at least, and we have to get toward fixing those. So it's been a tough time for many of us, and especially those in the Black community. But I think we're going to really start to put a lot more energy around this, and we have to do our part as a company and as individuals. So again, start of a very long journey ahead.
Yeah, I know you made a few references to some of the challenges that you're seeing in America, but over this past week, what was very clear to me is that Canada is not immune. We might be a little more politer about racism, but our institutions, our communities, our organizations have systemic racism built into them for hundreds of years. And so we need to do our part and not think that Canadians and our way of life is immune to this, because it may be masked slightly differently, but it is deep and it is a problem, and we all need to do our parts, both in our homes and in our workplaces. Aaron, I know you've been a huge supporter of having diverse and inclusive teams. We did a quick audit of your leadership team this morning. Great, good gender balance, great representation of underrepresented communities. Talk to me about why that's important to founders or people starting companies around how they should be thinking about diversity from when they start, from when they scale, to when they become publicly traded companies like yourself.
Yeah, I mean, this is an incredibly important topic, and frankly, one that we have still lots of work to do. So we are by no means the sort of best example of what companies should be ultimately striving for, but we too are on a journey and a path to make sure that at every level of the organization we have representation from all backgrounds and ethnicities throughout the organization, and I think it's a lot of work that has gone into it thus far, and again, it's something you have to be very conscious about to make sure that you're really continuing to improve the diversity of your organization. I think it's so incredibly obvious when you just think about it, which is what team would you rather be on? One where everybody had the same perspective and had the same background and went through life the exact same way, or a team where people brought lots of different diverse views and had different experiences, different upbringings, different backgrounds to be able to go and solve problems and to be able to go and think about what the future should look like, whether that's product innovation, whether that's engineering, whether that's marketing and go to market. I think organizations, the earlier that you start to think about diversity and inclusion, the earlier that you start to think about the trajectory you want your company to be on, from the very early days of being a startup, 3 or 5 people on up, that's where you're going to make a real dent. And so any startup out there that is really just starting to think about this, I would absolutely encourage you to put a massive degree of focus and prioritization on this, because it pays off really, really big over the near and long run in the kind of culture you can build, in the kind of innovation that you drive. And it's also just really, I think, important for society that we build equitable organizations. So I think any startup that, again, is has an opportunity to put more emphasis on this right now and prioritize it more absolutely should. And the tech industry, I think in particular, has to do way more as a community to open up, access to all different backgrounds and different experiences. You look at some of the stats where 1% of venture capital goes to Black founders. I mean, this is obviously an atrocity that we need to work on. There's so many amazing entrepreneurs out there that they just don't have maybe access to the Silicon Valley ecosystem. They're not already in the network, and we have such a closed system that only continues to sort of promote the people already within the system, as opposed to being able to bring more people in from maybe places that we wouldn't have thought of right next to the local communities in the valley, and so I think Silicon Valley is at the center of this. I think we're no exception to the issues that the Black community has faced around access to opportunity, and being able to make sure that they're on an even footing, and I think this is an important issue. It's been great in the past couple of weeks. We've seen new venture capital funds get launched rapidly. We've seen venture capital firms really put in a more focus on being inclusive of diverse founders. But again, this is like, we're so early in this, and there's so much more work to do. But I'm looking forward to seeing way more of this change continue to play out.
Yeah, you shared a really powerful metric, right? 1% of all venture capital funding goes to Black entrepreneurs, right? Which means they don't get to grow companies with the capital they need. They don't get to scale and hire, more diverse teams, right? We are passionate about diversity metrics, because if you can't measure the problem, you can't fix the problem. So I'm glad you shared that. One of the initiatives that we are championing at Elevate is to get companies to continue to share their diversity metrics and hold themselves accountable. Your thoughts around sharing transparently what your team makeup is, your leadership team, your board, saying, here's where we are, here are the changes we're making, here's where we hope to be a year from now. Talk to me about how important diversity metrics and the transparency around that is.
Yeah, well, I think exactly to that core point, you can't change what you can't measure, and whether that's a business product KPI, the active use of your product or your service, or the revenue that's coming in, or the leads that you're generating, or the makeup of your team, and how diverse is your team, how included do maybe historically underrepresented groups feel within your organization. What's the feeling of belonging within your organization? So I think there's a bunch of metrics that really end up painting the full picture of is your organization going to be able to be inclusive? Is it are you really thinking about diversity in the right way? And are your actions leading to better outcomes on that? And we've had to institute metrics all across the business to make sure that as we think about our hiring funnels and our interview panels and the recruiting classes that we're bringing in, and then ultimately the new hire classes, what are we doing at each stage to make sure that we're building a more diverse and inclusive organization? But again, it all starts with, first of all, it starts with it being a priority and a focus of the organization, but then ultimately, measuring it and making sure that you're holding yourselves accountable to those metrics becomes really important in the process.
Yeah, speaking of metrics, you guys have done a little bit of research yourself. You had shared a blog post around work unleashed, really around, I think we've been talking about the future of work for 20 plus years, at least back from my days at Achievers around HR tech. And, we've seen this incredible experiment, this work from home over the last 3 months, and how disruptive in a wonderful way that that COVID, while clearly some horrible things around the health crisis and the economic, but we've seen this huge transformation around how people work. Tell me a little bit about some of the trends that you've seen over these last 3 months. What is your research? What are the data telling us?
Yeah. So like you, we've been pushing on this space and this idea of a different way of working for now at Box 15 years, and it's the backdrop of this future of work being accelerated by a public health crisis, and obviously the economic turmoil that we're very, very certainly in is extremely just sad and not in a million years what we would have expected or wanted for people to sort of have this this awakening to this new way of working. But obviously, this massive thrust into everybody working from home has really caused people to I think have a very different view of what work can be like, where you go from the sort of typical 9-to-5 office-based work where you spend 30 minutes or an hour and a half on a commute each way to the office. We might sort of fit in some productivity from 9 to 5, and then we go back. And you might come into the workplace with let's say 8 hours of raw energy and time to be productive, and then it gets all squeezed out by meetings and process and sort of the bureaucracy of the organization that starts to kind of creep in. And now all of a sudden we've gone remote and we've moved to this work from home mode, and a bunch of things are changing. We're spending, first of all, our time is more flexible. We get to work a little bit more in the way that we want, even amidst a lot of the other distractions that people are dealing with, and a lot of the new responsibilities that people have to face while they work from home and schools are closed. But you get more flexibility. We see that there's a massive increase in collaboration. So people are sharing more, they're working together more. There's a major increase, very clearly in virtual meetings and virtual conferences. And what we're seeing is those virtual meetings aren't just replicating what we used to do in the office or in in-person experiences. They're starting to actually change the way that we work. So, we're able to spend more time with our customers as opposed to less time with our customers, which is sort of counterintuitive because we built this mindset that you would go and visit your customer on site and you drive out to them or you fly out to them. But that may have produced a great experience for that one customer, but think about all the other customers you couldn't serve in that day or in that week. And so this is letting you spend more time with your customers. It's letting you spend more time with more people on your team. If you are able to implement the right strategies, you can end up actually being more inclusive of more voices from around the organization. You're able to create more transparency and again, kind of effectively the vision that for decades and decades many businesses have had, which is a flat organization where you can share and you can collaborate all with one another. So we're starting to see this just dramatic acceleration of a lot of the ideals of the future of work. Much more agile, much flatter organizations, way greater transparency, better collaboration. And that's, again, 3 or 5 or 10 years of digital transformation accelerated into just a matter of weeks or a matter of months. And that's what we're now seeing in the data. And that's what's starting to, I think, almost get codified into the way that we're working, that we believe will be with us now well past when the health risks are behind us and even into whatever this sort of new normal ends up looking like.
Yeah, you talked about the productivity and the flexibility that we gained. There was a great article in the Wall Street Journal this weekend where it sort of turned its head on the sort of myth that employees at home wouldn't be productive. It's what they wanted. Founders and CEOs thought that work happened at the office, and they built these great, office-centric cultures. And then they found out that after 3 months that neither of them were true, right? That actually employees, some are looking forward to going to the office and do miss some of that routine, and that founders and CEOs are finding that employees are actually way more productive, which then causes, or then companies like Square and Twitter and homegrown Shopify, the CEOs come out publicly and say, you can work from anywhere at any time forever. You never need to come back to the office. So it was this huge shift from the office centricity of let's call it the past 20 years. You took a similar measure and said your team can stay home until January 2021. Aaron, why not go all the way? Why not say that Box employees never need to come back to work because you trust them, they're productive, they're flexible, all of the stuff that you just shared? Why not go forever?
No, it's a great question. First of all, let me dispel one immediate myth or concern, which is the trust element. I think any organization that's not letting their employees work from home because of trust, that's obviously an organization that has to rethink its culture and the way it operates. For us, we built a lot of in-person collaboration and in-person ways of working into the core fabric of the culture. And it's ironic, actually, because we founded the company in a completely distributed form. So for the first year and a half of building the business, none of the founders worked in the same room. We were effectively fully distributed. So, but what happened is we started to do what all classic Silicon Valley companies do. You started to build out your office, and you added the ping pong tables and the open floor plans, and that sort of started to reinforce this way of working, this way of collaborating. And what's been fantastic about the work from home experiment is we've realized that much of that was while it absolutely influenced probably the ultimate culture that we created around how we work together and how we communicate, it was certainly not necessary for driving the execution of the business. We in our remote work environment, we've probably shipped software faster than we ever have. We've been able to serve more customers than we ever have. We've been able to improve the velocity of just the core business programs, marketing and sales, and all that core engine. So we're I think as an organization quite excited about the potential of being distributed, of being able to work remotely. What we have heard, to your point, is we actually have a lot of employees that say, but I miss the office. I miss seeing people in person. I miss coming into work and seeing my friends, the colleagues that I built relationships with for many years. I think this in the 21st century, companies are not just places where you come in 9 to 5 and you punch out some data and then you're done. It's a community that of people that hopefully you want to be around and learn from and be able to build your career with. And so we know that offices are still going to be important because they become a convening environment for the organization. At the same time, to your point, we have a lot of employees that say, hey, this is going pretty well. Maybe even when offices do open, I want more flexibility of when I have to come into the office, what days I have to come in, or what hours I have to come in, or in maybe another scenario, I want to be able to move to a different state because my family's there and I want to go back and I don't want to have to leave Box as the organization to do that. So we imagine a hybrid future, which is one where people have more flexibility about where they work from, more flexibility about how they work, where we have offices as these hubs where people come together, but you also have the ability to work from anywhere and work from home and be able to work remotely. And it's all bridged by a digital workplace. And so that ability to have a digital first way of working where you're probably more video first, you're more real-time collaboration first, as opposed to you have to hop into a conference room for every meeting, which then excludes the virtual or remote group. So we're trying to really imagine what does that new digital workplace look like. And as we're imagining that, we're continuing to evolve our own people and HR practices. So we wanted to start with a very formal announcement that people can work from anywhere till the end of the year. But I think what you'll see is that we're going to increasingly offer that flexibility up to employees past the end of this year. We just wanted to create extreme clarity that while we're in this very dynamic health environment, people had did not have to worry about when the offices were going to be reopened, and we were just going to take that as a concern off of people's minds.
Yeah, listen, I couldn't agree with you more. This hybrid model of a digital first workforce is here to stay. I don't envision a time ever where companies require all of their employees, if they don't need to be at a physical location, to be at one. And I don't see everyone staying at home. I actually do see this hybrid model and the role of the office, as you mentioned, around social interactions and relationship building and sort of that impromptu water cooler type stuff. Actually, we think it'll happen more structurally when employees should come back, maybe more of an event social-like culture. We went to our audience to ask them when they thought it would be safe to return back to work. The number one answer was September 2020 at 31%. So it does seem, to your point, that there are people that are excited. Actually, it was the number one answer of coming back to work. It seems like probably at the soonest possible time, let's call it September 20. The least popular answer, Aaron, was January 2021 at 17%. Number three, when we have a vaccine at 28%, and then never was 24%. So I know it's a...
And think about that level of diverse set of opinions. I mean, this is what companies are dealing with. I mean, you don't have in there. You didn't have a single vote more than 6% or 7% different than the second highest. And so you can see how organizations are going to have to respond with just greater flexibility overall, because you might have a quarter of your population in every single camp, a quarter that wants to work in the office at all times, a quarter that wants more flexibility of when they come into the office, a quarter that wants to be completely remote. And then I didn't think of the fourth quarter, but I'm sure there's another one out there.
Yeah, no, I agree. You're right. You're seeing a very diverse set of answers. So the hybrid workforce, companies being more flexible, is what we think is going to be the future of work, which is now. Companies need to be figuring out their strategies around how to accommodate really four very different opinions around when it is safe to come back to work. Let's talk a little bit about the economic crisis. We have long believed that you should never let a crisis go to waste, that now is the best time to start a company. You had started your company just before the last economic crisis. Talk to me a little bit about how 2008, 2009 feels different than what we're experiencing with COVID today.
Yeah, well, I think so. I have a slightly maybe different view, which is I think it's always a good time to start a company if you have a great idea that is very relevant for a new set of problems that have just emerged. And it happens to be that when you have an economic crisis or a health crisis, there are going to be new problems that emerge, and there's going to be new opportunities for entrepreneurs to be able to build better systems and better services for what the future looks like than the incumbents. And I think it almost has nothing to do with the fact that you have a crisis, other than the fact that there's change in the system, which is causing new ideas and new opportunities to emerge. And I think when you look at, it's interesting because when you look at, when maybe today's biggest companies have been created, whether it's Amazon or Google or Facebook, I would actually argue that none of those were created during an economic crisis, and now they're 800, 900 and $1.3 billion trillion dollar companies between them. So what I would say to entrepreneurs out there is it's always a great time to start a company when you have an amazing idea that is very, very relevant for a new set of problems that have emerged. And if you look at today in 2020, well, we are sitting at the center of an all new set of problems that have just emerged. Think about the social behavior changes that just in a matter of 2 or 3 months have just completely rippled through how we behave and how we interact as a society. The fact that we all have friends or family or ourselves, we've been doing virtual yoga classes and virtual gym classes and virtual chef classes. Well, think about the 100 new business opportunities that emerge when people no longer think it's crazy to hop on a video call and learn from an expert to go do something, or to be a part of an online community, to be able to take their expertise and be able to interact with other people. All of a sudden, that changes all new categories of entertainment and education and discretionary spending. We've seen this in e-commerce, where the rise of delivery platforms it's just been unprecedented levels of growth. There's going to be all new delivery businesses and the logistics infrastructure that gets created around that. Think about the fact that now it's very obvious that people want to have telehealth experiences. We don't always want to have to go into the physical doctor office to be able to get a pretty easy checkup that we can do remotely if we have some quick symptoms that we want to get checked on. So now in the healthcare space, we are going to see all new opportunities to broaden access to healthcare and ensure that we can include even greater populations in delivering health services. So whether it's education, healthcare, entertainment, life sciences, financial services, retail, every single industry is going to have some degree of being reimagined right now because of this new way of working and because of this new way that our consumer experiences are being adapted to this environment. So I think there's going to be hundreds of, I mean, probably more, but at least hundreds of amazing companies, thousands of companies in total that will be created as a result of this environment. And there's going to be, amazing startup and entrepreneur stories as a result of that. But the focus has to be what has changed today that wasn't possible before because the social norms weren't there or the technology infrastructure wasn't built out. And that's really when you strike with a new startup.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more around what's changed in the world that your idea now solves a big problem. I remember when we were raising money from Sequoia Capital, and I'm in the boardroom, and the partners there, Doug Leone, is like, Razor, why now? It's sort of the famous Sequoia question: why is this a good idea, and why now? What's changed in the world? And so you identified a few things that really resonated with us here at Elevate around employee well-being, is what I'll call it, whether it's virtual yoga classes or meditation. We, to ensure the health and well-being of our own employees, launched a little internal program called Well-Beings, which really focuses on health, self, and wealth. And we're encouraging our employees to not just do Zoom meetings, go do walk and talks. We actually launched a step challenge a few weeks ago, and I knew the team was pretty competitive, but it is the most active channel on our Slack of everybody taking photos, sharing their step counts, trying to one-up each other in a wonderful way of all trying to stay healthy and safe during this difficult time. So mother is the necessity of all invention. And I would say for entrepreneurs out there, look at those changes in behavior. What are you doing different? What are your friends, companies, organizations doing different? Because that problem that you adapted to could be a great idea for a product that ultimately launches a great company. So let's talk about when you started. There's a great little folklore that, Mark Cuban, you had cold emailed him. He was one of your first investors. I believe he wrote a check to you for $350,000. Again, from a cold email. He was one of your first investors when you raised outside capital for your company. We had Mark Cuban on a few weeks ago, and he had sold his shares pretty early on because he didn't agree with you in terms of the strategy. Clearly he's still kicking himself about making that bet. But what does it feel like? You get a prominent investor, he disagrees with your strategy. Clearly you were on the right side of history on this one, and you persevered with your vision. What did it feel like betting against Mark Cuban?
Well, I don't know if he's kicking himself. I think Mark's done okay over the years, so I'm sure he's doing all right now. But we had a pretty simple disagreement that just was ended up being pretty fundamental, but the concept was simple. And I think you never know actually who was more right, because we can't play out his path that he wanted to go down. And I mean, it's very plausible that his path could have led to an even bigger company. But obviously, that's impossible to test. But we had this simple idea, which was we had to pivot the company to focus on enterprises, and we wanted to give away our product for free to make it more attractive for people to go and sign up and start using it. And his view was that we should be building a profitable, cash flow positive company that didn't require outside venture capital. And it's actually funny because and this was when we were at less than $1 million in revenue, and so to us, we saw it as being too early to only focus on monetization, because we just felt like we would never get to hundreds of millions in revenue or billions in revenue if we only focus on monetization at that scale. It's interesting because I look back and I think it's feedback that you sort of build with age and with when you've seen the story so many times. And it's funny because I now actually give entrepreneurs very similar feedback that Mark gave us, because you do see so many startups that become so addicted to and dependent on venture capital to keep growing and to keep funding the business. And it does build a certain degree of lack of just really getting to the fundamentals of your business model and making sure that you've got a very strong business model at the core of what you're doing. And you sort of get hooked on always needing to raise another round of funding to keep the business afloat and to keep it scaling. And I think that's what Mark feared for our business. And he had seen it so many times, especially in the dot-com bubble, which we were just finally coming out of when we raised money from Mark. So I don't think that his perspective was wrong or the advice was wrong. I think there probably would have been a way for us to compromise, but the world was moving quickly, and we ended up just having sort of fundamental disagreement around what path to pursue, and he decided that we could go and pursue our path, but he was sort of less invested in that approach. So I credit him for a lot of amazing wisdom and advice over the years that really stuck with us early on, and we absolutely would not be here without his initial investment. So we owe Mark a lot for those early years, and again, I think it's the ultimate irony that I'm now certainly giving other entrepreneurs his same advice, because you just see venture capital sometimes just crushing what could have been great businesses if the founders had just focused on getting to profitability sooner, getting to cash flow positive sooner, and really being able to have their own sustainable way of growing the business that doesn't require lots of influxes of cash from the outside.
Yeah, listen to me. I couldn't agree with you more. We did an episode on founder-friendly financing that doesn't require a board seat, financing that doesn't require dilution, right? Financing that doesn't require onerous conditions on founders when they're growing their business. We love profitable companies. We love revenue is the best source of capital. I'm glad you're now on that boat, but you took a different path because you did raise a lot of venture capital to build the company. The freemium model, while the right strategy, did obviously get you to the hundreds of millions of revenue, you did suffer a lot of dilution in that journey. I believe when you went public, you owned about 4% of Box. And while nobody feels bad for you because Box is worth billions of dollars and 4% of $1 billion is great, but would you do things differently around founder dilution?
Well, I guess it's all one and the same. So I had no control of the dilution because we felt like we needed the capital. So what I would have done, maybe with grand amount of hindsight and ability to go back in time, is I probably would have prioritized cash flow earlier in the business and tried to create a better flywheel of cash coming in to fund the growth, and maybe there'd be one or two funding rounds that could have been prevented. Unfortunately, it's one of those things where the most dilutive rounds were the earliest ones, and those were the ones where we probably needed the capital the most just to get the flywheel going. And then, ironically, the least dilutive rounds were the ones where we raised the most amount of money. And that was just because the scale of the business could really drive that flywheel. So you'd have to go back and really adjust your Series A, your Series B, maybe your Series C. And unfortunately, at those times, those were venture rounds of only a few $1 million, $5 or $10 million, and it was really, really necessary in that phase to get the flywheel going. So I think certainly the good news is for founders today is it's a very different funding environment. When we were doing our Series A's and B's and C's, it was in the kind of 06 to 09 timeframe. And venture capital was obviously very ripe and very rich at the time, but only a small factor of what it is today. So I think most entrepreneurs hopefully today are able to raise those kinds of levels of capital with less dilution and without giving up as much control. But I don't have a lot of regrets on anything on this front. We're happy to be where we're at and what we've built out, and again thankful that we've been able to have great backers along the way. It's my job just to make sure that other entrepreneurs out there are really thinking about cash flow, thinking about profitability, because it's way better to control your destiny when you have a self-sustaining business model.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Okay, Aaron, we're going to try something new on this show. We're going to beta test this with you. It's called Explain That Tweet. Great, hilarious tweets out there. And so I'm going to take you back when you tweeted this first one to Dear Reuters, can I upload a new photo to this article? Explain that tweet. What were you thinking in May 27?
Well, I was mostly just thinking that I wish I had a slightly different angle of my face and my hair and my body language. Reuters doesn't seem to let you upload your own imagery to their articles, so I got to delete that one from the internet somehow.
All good, all good. You had a tweet. There was a billboard on the side of the 101 from our dear friends at Clearbank who are promising 20-minute term sheets. And you're like, but 25 minutes would just be too long to get that. Talk to me about, explain that tweet.
Silicon Valley is notorious for its billboards. And so for anybody who's come to the Valley, we have this highway called 101, and every single 500 feet, there's a billboard for a different startup. So to me, it was sort of the best manifestation of both the billboard economy of just how ludicrous startup billboards were getting, and the offer itself I just found to be sort of peak Silicon Valley mindset around needing $10 million in 20 minutes. And while I completely appreciate the idea and I think it's exciting anytime entrepreneurs can push the limits, I did find it to be quite a fascinating concept that you would need that much money that quickly. But again, kudos to those founders for pushing the limits of financial services.
Awesome. Okay, tweet 3. We've seen global events around the world focus on the health and safety of their communities and cancel mainly the in-person events. But CES decided to go in a different way. They have told the world that CES in Las Vegas is happening in 2021. Dr. Falsey just passed out reading this. Talk to me about your reaction to the in-person live events.
Yeah, well. So for those who aren't tracking, Dr. Fauci is the sort of in the U.S. he's the kind of main guy that is working on the country's sort of health strategy and what to do with the COVID crisis. And so I think he's definitely sitting around somewhere with a high degree of anxiety when you see videos coming out of Las Vegas with just the sheer number of people that are all together with no masks and in enclosed spaces. And we obviously know from a lot of the evidence that the spread of COVID happens in these very closed indoor environments. And so I think the challenge for any industry, let alone live events and businesses, is going to be how do you stay operational? How do you support your communities at the same time? How do we make sure that we deal with the public health crisis that will almost certainly still exist in January of next year? So I look forward to seeing how CES pulls it off from a health and safety standpoint. But it's going to be a very interesting year ahead of how do we balance these two forces of public health and kind of letting communities thrive and businesses thrive at this time.
Awesome. Okay, we are going to go to our AMA Ask Me Anything. Aaron's going to ask all of your questions. Our first one is a Zoom drop-in. We've got Vanish Sethi. He's a 15-year-old student and a member of the Knowledge Society to ask his question. He's a future unicorn. He's exploring the intersection of machine learning and quantum computing. I know when I was 15, that's not what I was exploring the intersections of. Vanish, over to you. What's your question for Aaron? You might be on mute, Vanish.
Uh-oh. Oh, you might be on mute. That happens 100% of all of my meetings. So.
No, we'll give you a couple more seconds, then we'll go to our Zoom questions.
I hate microphones. Don't worry, man.
Okay, we're gonna go to our Zoom most upvoted question from Lauren McDonald. Over to you, Aaron. She'd like to know, how do you see office communication changing in the absence of face-to-face interactions?
Yeah, I think, and feel free, if Vanish wants to text me the question, happy to answer it in some other format, and if the mic doesn't come back, so just let me know. So office communications is obviously going to change pretty dramatically, where as we move to Zoom, as we move to Slack, as we move to these more modern ways of communicating, I think we're going to have more of a digital first mindset in how we communicate and how we collaborate. And I think one of the exciting things is when you move to a virtual approach, you can actually include more people into the conversation. And if you think about your typical office meeting where you go into a conference room and it can maybe fit 6 people or 8 people or 10 people, and that's sort of this arbitrary finite limit of the number of people that can participate in that project or in that conversation. Well, when you move to something like Slack or Teams or Zoom, all of a sudden you can have any number of participants in the conversation. And what we're seeing at Box is that's really changing the dialogue. It's changing the strategy. It's letting more people with more from voices all throughout the organization to contribute to whatever that project is. And an example is we have a project running right now at Box where previously we maybe would have only had 8 people or 10 people work on this project. But now we have a Slack channel with about 100 or more people that all are sort of loosely affiliated with this project, and they can all contribute ideas and they can all pass ideas back and forth. And that's actually helping create all new levels of innovation for this particular project. And that would not have been possible if we were reliant on physical in-office communication as our mechanism. But it became possible when we moved to a digital platform and we started to communicate in much more of a digital first way. So I think that even when we go back to offices, I think that we're going to work in a digital first mode of operating, which is going to mean that we're going to be on video calls more. We're going to be in Slack and other digital collaboration tools more, and that's what's going to stitch together the physical office and the virtual sort of work from anywhere approach that we see today.
Okay, we've got Vanish back. Vanish, over to you.
Awesome. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah. Hey, perfect.
Awesome. So first of all, I'd just like to thank the people at Elevate for making this thing happen. I'm super excited to be asking a question. So I think when Razor said that office centricity is dissolving, I think you're completely right. But I also think that there are some massive downfalls with that. So my question for you, Aaron, is that do you think big companies will become compelled to outsource in third world countries? And also,
Uh-oh.
Vanish. Okay, we're going to go to Daniela B. Aaron, she asks you, with more employees working from home and the heightened security risks that we're seeing in the workforce, what do companies need to do from a cybersecurity point to provide, a safe solution from working from home?
Yeah, so I think we've never seen a situation where your entire company all of a sudden appears on unmanaged networks, on unmanaged devices in a corporate environment, and all of a sudden people are working, on their own personal laptops, on their own personal Wi-Fi, and data security is really front and center in this environment. The protection of critical file assets and data in your databases, and how people are accessing and communicating around information is so unbelievably important. And I think having critical security hygiene right now is more important than ever before. There's amazing companies and products, whether it's Cloudflare or Palo Alto Networks or Cisco, or McAfee and other technology companies that are building security to help people in this remote work environment, and Okta for identity management. So I think having best of breed technology to help with remote work security is really, really important. And at Box, we're very focused on helping people be able to securely access and share their files while they're in that remote work environment as well. So we certainly play a role in ensuring the data security for our customers.
We're going to go to Jay next. Jay wants to know, Aaron, your thoughts around how the tech community can play its part on helping fight the injustices around systemic racism. Yeah,
I think the tech community, as we kind of talked about earlier, plays a really important role in this, whether it's access to venture capital and the funding levels that are out there for Black founders and entrepreneurs, whether it's the inclusion within organizations, the belonging that companies create, the hiring rates, the outreach into maybe ecosystems that classically you weren't doing recruiting from, to make your technology company more accessible by again more communities. I think hiring, inclusion, funding, belonging, all of these things are all going to play a role in making sure that we can have a much kind of fairer and just society and technology ecosystem.
Okay, so we're going to get Vanish's questions one way or the other. He texted it into us. So on behalf of him, as more jobs become remote. Okay, he's back.
Hopefully third time's the charm. And my question was about office centricity. So as office centricity is dissolving, my question was, do you think that these big tech companies will be compelled to outsource their more advanced work to people in third world countries? And if so, what will that mean for the local economies that are primarily made up of tech jobs and just the international economy?
Yeah, this is a great question. I'm glad we got a chance to hear it. So I think for so long, access to technology jobs has been really driven by what geography you're in. So are you in Toronto? Are you in Vancouver? Are you in Austin, Texas? Are you in Silicon Valley? Are you in New York? And those are sort of where hubs have been built out. But if you think about it, that kind of makes no sense, because in the tech industry, if we're building digital platforms, we should be able to bring together work and talent from wherever people are that can access those digital platforms. So I think this is going to be an amazing moment where companies can include more of the global population in the tech and digital economy. I am of the belief that will be a net positive, even for local economies that are already tech hubs, because I think that the tech industry is only growing at a more rapid pace than ever before. And I don't think that any one individual local ecosystem can support all of the talent that an organization or even country needs to be able to drive this innovation. And so I think that being able to include more populations, again, whether it's in your country or globally, is going to be very helpful for innovation. It's going to let more companies flourish and thrive and succeed and scale. And I think that the local ecosystems that adapt will be the ones that are most competitive. So, what local ecosystems have the best immigration policies to be able to bring in amazing talent into that local environment, and which ones are able to solve their housing challenges. And in Silicon Valley, we have a housing crisis where it's way too expensive to live, and we think this is going to be really important to being able to show that we are not going to be just fixed in Silicon Valley going forward. So we have to have more global competitiveness as we build out the digital economy. But really great question, and glad we were able to hear it on that third time.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Aaron, thank you so much. It is all the time we have today. We're so grateful for you and your wife for personally taking a stand for Box's role in helping us solve some of the challenges. As a small token of our appreciation from here at Elevate, we have planted the Aaron Levie Forest with our partners at Trees Canada. Know that once we deal with the global pandemic, the economic crisis, the hundreds of years of systemic racism, we do have a climate crisis also that we need to tackle. Know that you're doing your part. Thank you for joining us on today's show.
Thank you. Really good to be here. Take care.
Thanks, Aaron. Looking forward to meeting again in person. Next week, as we addressed at the top of this show, we are going to continue the conversation around what the tech community can do its part to help change the injustices to the Black community and other underrepresented communities. We're going to be having a conversation around how you can do your part. And we want to turn that conversation into action. What are we going to be doing differently as a result of the recent events? Clearly, they're not the first time. They won't be the last time, but we all need to do our part. We all need to take a step. And so I'm looking forward to having that conversation and discussing what is the right approach, what can we all do at home, in our workplaces, with our policymakers, all contributing to moving society forward and ending the injustices to the Black community. I am so grateful to our team at Elevate for continuing to do great work, for continuing to elevate the conversations that need to be had in our community. It's the end of our show today. Stay healthy, stay safe, and let's take care of each other. Thanks so much. My name is Razor Suleiman, and I'll see you next week on Elevate Live. Bye.